All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another great edition of The Hit. I am Logan Graffia. He is Kevin Rons. And with us today, y'all know him. I call him the sixth man of The Hit because he comes off the bench whenever one of us can't make it. Johann Castro, my dear friend.
I made it when both of you were here today. I lucked out. I actually got to be the sixth man.
Hey, either way, we're happy to have you here. So
Happy to be
today,
here, guys.
today we are going to discuss some Saints topics today. We're not going to discuss the Pelicans today. We're going to save that for another time. So, first thing is first, let's talk about the Senior Bowl that just happened over the weekend. I'm just going to say it was a very subpar game. I don't think any of us was expecting it to be a complete shootout with both teams, but we all had eyes on this game because, of course, there were some Saints staff members there. Ronald Curry was the OC of, I want to say, the national team, and DJ Williams was the quarterbacks coach, et cetera, et cetera. But all eyes were on some of the prospects during the Senior Bowl. And we're going to go straight to Johan here. What player at the Senior Bowl to you stood out the most?
Gotta say, I never really put too much stock in the Senior Bowl or any of the games like that because it's one game and it could be kind of a flash in the pan deal. I like to see the combine and everything else before making a decision on like, oh yeah, I'd really like to have that guy on the Saints. But Jalen Wayne, he was the leading receiver in the game from South Alabama. Again, a guy who's probably not going to be a day one or two pick, probably going to be like a mid day three pick. But you see, that's the kind of guy that I would look at in a game like that and say, you know what, he can come in, he can contribute. The Saints still need receiver help badly. You know, when you have to bring Keith Kirkwood back because your receiver room is so shallow, you could go with drafting another receiver at least at some point in the draft. So I really liked what Jalen Wayne did. I thought he looked really good. Of course, I mean, being here in New Orleans, we look at Tyjae Spears. We saw what he did. He didn't really get too many carries, but he did do some work in the passing game. I'm very excited to see what he's going to do moving forward because I think he's going to be a steal. Like some team's going to grab him probably early day three. He's going to be a great third down back in the NFL. And yeah, a few guys that could be gems. There were some guys on defense, guys like Keon White, and then the defensive tackle from Wisconsin, whose name is escaping me right now. Benton, I think, is his last name. So there were some guys who stood out. Some guys that I think the Saints could look at probably, round three and on.
Calvin, I'm going to go to you. Was there anybody in particular that kind of stood out to you? It could be one, it could be two. Just what player stood out to you or players stood out to you the most?
Well, I was hoping that the quarterback would stand out a little more, just because we all know, quarterback is something that we're looking at. Unfortunately, that didn't really happen. I mean, they had efficient games, but not anything to jump off the paper to me. But I have Evan Hall, the running back here from Northwestern. 10 carries, 74 yards, and he has some pretty nice looking runs. I think he averaged, around 7 yards a carry. That's pretty decent. Um, I believe in getting the running back in the late rounds. I mean, to me, running backs are a dime a dozen. And, if you don't get Tajay Spears, which I think would be great, or if you don't get a Jameer Gibbs, who could be a next Alvin Kamara, who knows? You can never go wrong with picking one in the late rounds because they're usually pretty solid. I have Stanford's receiver, Michael Wilson, 4 receptions, 76 yards, and 1 TD. Really solid guy there. But for the most part, though, that's really all I have. I mean, the game was just so lackluster to me, and it just wasn't the things that I was really looking for. I really, really, really was hoping that Malik Cunningham comes out and balls out, but didn't see too much of him. But when we did, it was all right. Um, hopefully next year Senior Bowl is better, but maybe we won't be talking about next year because hopefully, we're a good football team. But wishful
Well,
thinking.
I mean, I love all the prospects that y'all said. I mean, for me, I'm very upset that, Tajay Spears only had one carry the entire Senior Bowl. Was kind of thinking, okay, I'm hearing that he's getting player of the week or practice player of the week at the Senior Bowl. I'm thinking, oh, he's going to get a ton of carries. Just one. Come on, guys. But one guy that stood out to me was Aubrey Miller Jr. from Jackson State, linebacker. I mean, he was flying around. I mean, I got to find his stats. I want to say he had 5 tackles throughout the whole game. I could be mistaken, maybe even more, but he was flying all across the field. And people are going to call me crazy. I did the measurables on this. He reminds me of a young Jets version of Jonathan Vilma. They both have the same. I think Jonathan Vilma is 6'1", Aubrey Miller 6'2". I think Jonathan Miller is 230. His playing weight was 230, and Aubrey Miller is 225. And I mean, the measurables just add up.
One of those patented Logan Graphia analogies. I see
Gotta-
this kid from Jackson State, and he looks like Jonathan Vilma.
Gotta
Hey.
keep it to a Saints player always. They have to be a Saints player of some sort.
Hey, I try. And also, I mean, we could use another linebacker because, I mean, we don't know how much longer DeMario Davis is going to be here because, I mean, age catches up to you eventually. But
And
I mean,
DeMarco Jackson was hurt last year.
it is true. DeMarco Jackson was hurt, but we don't know what we're going to do in the draft. It's very puzzling. And also another position in need that we can actually go for is tight end. And Will Mallory from the U actually had a decent game. I mean, 5 catches. I want to say, I mean, I have the stats right here. I just passed it up. And
this is a really strong tight end draft, too, because you're going to have, I mean, Michael Mayer is going to go in the first round. Then you're going to have a lot of guys. Like, look at pick 40 for the Saints. There's going to be a lot of guys available right around there. I think, Darnell Washington, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State, Dalton Kincaid from Utah. There's a few guys who I think are going to be on the board in play if they choose to go in the direction of tight end, which I've been saying for years they need to get a tight end to replace Troutman. Second round, I think, is really going to be a good spot for that.
And I mean, with a guy like Will Mallory, I mean, I don't see him going in the second round or even third. He looks like he's going to be a 5th-round pick, but he could be a steal.
Yeah, he's a day 3 guy. Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to get somebody like that. And then, I mean, you have somebody like Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. I mean, we're looking for a big body receiver, and he has the big body and he has the speed too. I mean, even though LSU came back and won that game, he was killing LSU throughout that first half of that game earlier this year. And I mean, we can use another receiver, especially a big body, because we know Michael Thomas is out the door. That's 100% got to be true. He's out the door. That's what it seems like.
Tank Dell from Houston's also someone to keep an eye on. Now he's pretty skinny. His issue is going to be he needs to bulk up a little bit more, but he's a big body guy. He's a physical guy. He just has to put on some muscle, but that's one you got to look at.
Calvin, I got to ask this question. With Ronald Curry and a couple of Saints staff members being at the Senior Bowl, do you think that's going to kind of help them persuade DA and Mickey in that draft room?
It could if it was another team, but I just think Mickey and Jeff Ireland and DA, they're just so headstrong, all of them. I don't really know how much is gonna work. I mean, we just seen Chris Richard leave because of really just disagreements with DA. I'm pretty sure that went down to play calling responsibility. So I mean, we're looking at DA having a little power trip. He does wants to have some type of power. He's going to build the team the way he wants to build the team. Obviously, Mickey Loomis and all those guys, they make the real decisions. But, of course, they're going to keep DA in the loop. That's just a gimme. It's just kind of like when Sean Payton was here. He was really the guy drafting, for being honest. So I don't really see it affecting the draft process too much, especially with the draft being – I think we heard a quote from someone in the front office. I believe it was like Jeff Ireland when they asked him or something like that. He was basically like, it just comes down to evaluation. Like the game is the game. They know who they like and who they don't like, and I don't know if this game had enough people jumping off the page too much to say, all right, let's go back here and get this guy from the game.
Yeah, I mean, like Calvin just said, I mean, and like I said earlier, you with games like the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Game, you're kind of looking for guys you can grab later in the draft. A lot of these guys are not first round picks. Don't get me wrong. You do have a few sprinkled in here and there. But the guys who are going to go early in the first round, they don't need to play in games like this because, what their level of talent is. This is kind of a showcase for a lot of guys. And to pair it off with what Calvin said, I think, I remember after, I don't know if it was immediately after Peyton retired or exactly what the deal was, but I want to say it was Jeff Duncan, and I hope I'm citing that correctly. It might not have been him, it might have been somebody else, but they basically said that Sean Payton had autonomy. Like if he made a decision, like they respected it. Dennis Allen had to earn that. And I doubt after last season he's earned total autonomy yet. Now don't get me wrong, I think Mickey's going to want to build a team that fits his image because he wants to win, right? And he wants to be proven that he made the right call hiring the DA. But I think when it's all said and done, it's probably going to come down to more than we've probably seen in recent years. It's going to come down to scouting, and it's going to come down to, what do the guys in the room think?
That's a good point. And I mean, we're talking about the front office, and they had the media from down here talking to Jeff Ireland, and they was asking him about a certain position of need that we need, which is quarterback. You would have to think that's the number one position in need for this team going into the season. And they asked him, what are some of the traits that you look for in a quarterback? And the three things that he said actually really stood out to me. One was, I think he has to have intelligence to be able to he had dual threat. And I can't remember the third one, and I'm sure Calvin can remember the three things that he said, but he said dual threat.
And he said dual threat, and he's got to be able to throw whenever he's hurt because he ain't going to be able to use his legs. So that's what you're looking for.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, because they was asking him about Drew. What made Drew so good? And he said Drew gave him three tips, and I cannot for the life of me remember what those were, but they're dual threat. Apparently, we're going to go after, hopefully, a dual threat.
They got to be smart. They got to be smart.
They most definitely got to be smart. I mean, last year, it didn't seem like we had either of them quarterbacks were all that smart. I mean, if this was 2011, I mean, Andy Dalton might have been killing it because, I mean, that was when Andy Dalton was in his prime, was in like the 2011s and 2013s, but he's 35 and he did what a 35-year-old did. And, I mean, now it's time to move on.
I think the reason he probably ended up starting most of the season was probably because Jameis Winston was hurt, that definitely played a factor. But also, I think Andy Dalton could probably interpret the offense a little bit better. They still tried to run a lot of what Peyton ran. Andy Dalton's got a low ceiling. He's, 35 going on 36. So, I mean, you definitely need to improve off of that. But to run an offense like the West Coast offense, you need to have a quarterback that's got, that can change your play at the line of scrimmage. Drew Brees and Peyton Manning are the two guys credited with basically changing pre-snap football. Like those are the two guys who understood, I mean, I don't want to say the two smartest quarterbacks of all time, but they really understood kind of fundamental X's and O's like no other quarterbacks we've ever seen.
Can't argue with that. I mean, you got Omaha and then you got kill from Drew. But the one thing that really stood out to me from Jeff was the dual threat point. Because, I mean, he didn't say, I want a pocket passer. Okay, you could scratch off a few of the prospects in the draft because there's a few of them that are just pocket passers. And then there's a couple that just come to mind that are dual threats. And Calvin, what few quarterbacks come to your mind in this draft that are dual threats and can actually stay in the pocket and don't have to use their legs? I mean, I know who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I feel like this is him trying to throw me a lob to say Hendon Hooker. So you know what? I'm going to take the lob and I'm going to slam it. Hendon Hooker. There you go. There's your guy. Doing some more some highlighting and film scouring. I might say a little bold take here. I might be okay with Anthony Richardson. I just might. If and only if we get a really, really, really great QB coach or somebody that can like really help develop him. Like I'm gonna need Pete to be all hands on deck with this guy. Just because, I mean, the physicals are there and he can run, right? He has an arm. If you could just hone that in a little bit. But I mean, look, I'm on the fence about it, so don't crucify me yet, everybody. But if it happens, it is what it is. I don't think it's going to be like a Lamar Jackson situation where people were questioning, oh, can he throw? And he turns out to be an MVP. Like, I don't think it's going to be one of those situations. I mean, really, any other quarterback. I mean, obviously you have C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. C.J. only decided to really start running in the last game that he played in, which is surprising me because he could have been doing that a lot all year. I would used to have Malik Cunningham, but he just kind of fell off so much this season. It's kind of like, and obviously there's my guy, Lindsey Scott. I really do love Lindsey Scott's game. I say it all the time. I love Lindsey Scott. If we get him in the later rounds, to me, that's a steal. I don't care. Anything like past round 5, we pick him up, steal. Especially if we get him in UDFA, absolute steal. But
it would be UDFA. It'd be UDFA for Lindsey Scott.
Hey, Scott's a baller. He's a gamer. He's an absolute gamer. I played with the guy in Little League. I've seen him his whole life. The dude's a gamer, man. He's an absolute gamer.
Yeah, he was good. He was good at FCS for a while.
Oh yeah.
I mean, remember we saw him in Nichols, Logan. We saw him in that game, and he was great that game, and he did great at Incarnate Word. So yeah, yeah, possibly, but that would definitely be like a 7th round / UDFA,
which I'm fine with. I mean, if we were to draft 2 quarterbacks, and I mean, some type of reason we drafted 2, I mean, we've seen it done before with the Washington Redskins during their RG3 days, but I'd be okay with it. I mean, say we do draft Hendon Hooker, and they just say, you know what? Screw it. Let's go get another one and get Lindsey Scott as like an undrafted free agent or something to that effect. I'd be okay with it because, like I told Calvin, and he calls me crazy for it, is he can be like the next Taysom Hill. I'm not saying put him at tight end. And then
he ain't Taysom Hill. Then you can't say make him Taysom Hill. You're not gonna put him at tight end.
Is he big enough to play?
He's 5'11". No.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep him at where he's at. He's never done any of that in his life. Like, yeah, he's athletic, but you can't say every quarterback that's athletic can go and be another position. I mean, we're not going to say Will Levis go play, tight end, go be receiver.
Oh God, no.
Doing that.
But I will say this: Anthony Richardson right now is more of a tight end than a quarterback because mechanically he is all over the place.
He's a Tim Tebow. He is.
It's one thing in college to not win, but like at least have the mechanics to win. Like Patrick Mahomes didn't really win a lot at Texas Tech, but you saw flashes of brilliance. You saw the raw talent was there. And he got into a situation where, he gets picked by Andy Reid and gets to sit for a year, right? So he kind of had everything work out in that regard. Anthony Richardson the guy's a total project. Mechanically, he's all over the place. Like, I think you need to sit him at least 2 years. Like, you need to get Derek Carr or somebody in the building to start while he develops. And I mean, he's a long-term project. He's not a guy who can start right away. Hendon Hooker, Logan knows how I feel about him. Look, he's talented. My concern about Hendon Hooker is he's old for a rookie. 25 is old. He's coming off of this injury, so you're not even going to have him in the preseason. And then his offense in college was he ran a very college offense, and Josh Heupel did develop some talented quarterbacks that got into the NFL, but my concern is, he was throwing to guys who had 10 and 20 yards of separation a lot of the time. He was also throwing to 3 NFL caliber wide receivers. And the one game where he played an NFL caliber defense, which is Georgia, 3 first-round talents possibly, he struggled, right? So I have some reservations about Hendon Hooker. I think there are 3 quarterbacks in this class really who are going to be stars: Young, Stroud, and Levis. And Levis is even kind of borderline. He might have to go into the right situation. If they take one in round 2 or 3, I wouldn't be angry at it. But anyone that you're expecting to start right off the bat, I don't think you're going to find that. I don't think, unless you somehow get into that top 10 and get one of those 3 guys I just mentioned. It's a lot of projects in this class. And then the guy like Tanner McKee doesn't really, he's more of a traditional pocket passer, but doesn't really have, kind of a low ceiling guy, kind of like an Andy Dalton type. So I don't know. I'm looking at it, and pick 29, you're kind of limited with what you can get. So, we'll see what happens. I'm a little bit more pessimistic, let's just say, but that's just kind of what I see with the quarterbacks in this draft.
I'm definitely on the same page with that. If you listen to podcasts before, I would tell Logan, like, hey, look, if you ain't trading up to get, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, don't bother picking a quarterback in the first round this year. Don't. I said it last year. I said last year the only quarterback that's a first round talent is probably Kenny Pickett. And everybody
you
else
saw what happened.
Yeah, and I said everybody else after that is third round, and then everybody else was literally third round and below. So me personally, I like the quarterback class next year better than this one.
Oh yes. Oh my
So
God. Next year it's gonna be amazing.
it's so good. So I'm like, if we're gonna draft a quarterback this year, like sure, but later round, whatever. That's why I'm fine with Lenny Scott. If we get Hendon Hooker in the third round, I think that's fine. But if there's a quarterback like next year in the first round, if we're bad, you have to take it. Like you just have to. They're so good next year.
You're gonna have two like generational quarterbacks at the top of that draft, Drake May and Caleb Williams. Like both of those guys are going to transform a franchise. And it's going to be like the Luck and RG3 year. And then you've also got Michael Penix is going to be in that draft. He's really good. Quinn Ewers will probably declare. I mean, you're going to have some studs. Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. You're going to have some studs in that class next year.
Now, see, Logan, I'm going to put you on the spot here because when I told you, hey, Caleb Williams is here next year, like, if we're bad, so be it. I'm not saying tank whatever, but if we're bad, go get him, you know?
Well,
you don't think he's going to be that great.
But
But Sean Payton himself said that man is going to be the reason why we have, lottery pick systems in the NFL because he's that
Logan,
great.
you should have had me and Calvin on together a long time ago because, like, he's saying everything I've said. Like, that's why I wanted that first-round pick next year because at the very least you could trade the 2 picks and move up to get him.
Exactly.
Well, what I've been telling Calvin is I don't want to tank because it's what I tell him. I said losing franchise. Well, I mean, historically the Saints have been a losing franchise before Sean got there, but for the last 20 years we've been a winning one. But still, I am not in favor of tanking like a whole bunch of other people are because once you tank, players like to leave. Like your good players like to leave, and we've seen the Browns tank for many, 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 many years and how that's worked out.
I'm not pro tanking. I'm more pro
Make the right
realistically
decision.
what you're looking at here. I mean, if they had gotten that first round pick next year, let's say they went 6 and 11, 7 and 10. Well, then you'd have probably the 10th pick, and then you'd have Denver's pick. I don't think Denver's gonna be very good next year. So you could possibly have 2 top 15 picks. You could package that and move into the top 3, right? That's what I was kind of looking at with it. But again, no, I'm on the same page there. I think tanking is a bad precedent. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, we've seen what a disaster the Browns have been. I mean, before they got Josh Allen, Buffalo was a complete disaster, for the better part of 2 decades. So, but when it comes to, I mean, quarterback is always going to be a contentious conversation because you're going to have people wanting this guy and other people wanting this guy. Ultimately, you just need to get someone who could play, who can lead you to the promised land, lead you to a Super Bowl. That's what I'm always looking for in a guy. Is he talented enough to reach that level?
Now, with me, I mean, I know Calvin laughs at me when I bring up Hendon Hooker, but the one thing that really stands out to me is the touchdown to INT ratio his last 2 years at Tennessee. His first year at Tennessee wasn't, I don't even think, in the rankings, to my knowledge. Were they?
Well, I'll say this about Hendon Hooker. He led Tennessee to their best success since 2000, the early 2000s.
Probably since
right?
Manning.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a bad quarterback. Like, he's a talented guy, and I think Josh Heupel's a very good coach. The concern is the age, the injury, and then in my case, the offense, right? How Tennessee ran like an offense where they were at the line every like 10 seconds running a play. And that's just not how it works in the NFL. So, that's kind of my reservation with him. If the Saints take him and he ends up being a stud, I'd be happy to be wrong. And I'll say this, I think he'd be a better pick than Anthony Richardson.
Oh, definitely.
So, he'd probably be a first-round pick had he not gotten hurt. He probably would have been top 25 had he not gotten hurt.
He was the Heisman favorite for the longest throughout the season before his injury, but at the Senior Bowl, they was interviewing him. I want to say Tom Pelissero from NFL Network interviewed him and was asking him about his rehab process, and he said, I'll be running by March, and he said, I'll be ready for the first day of training camp, which means if he's ready for training camp, he'll play in the preseason. And, I mean, 25, this is another thing that people have been talking about. I think Pat McAfee even made this comment on his show that I was watching. It was talking about Hendon Hooker, and they said, why are people looking at 25 like it's 52? It's not. It's not old for a quarterback. They can understand, okay, 25 is like a D lineman, a cornerback. Okay, that's old. But for a quarterback, no, because quarterbacks generally play longer than many other positions. But another thing that really stood out to me about Hendon was it's 2 years in the SEC. He played against some of the top defenses out there. He might have struggled against Georgia, but who didn't? I mean, LSU got 50 dropped on him. And then the next week, Georgia dropped 60, almost 70 points on TCU in the national championship. They was doing that against almost everybody except for a couple games where they was close with Missouri, but that's not the point. I mean, 5 interceptions in 2 years against SEC defenses, including Bama, who's almost top 15 every year in defense.
Well, to refer to what sorry to cut you off, to refer to what McAfee said about age, if you're a pocket passer and you're not taking a lot of hits, then yes, 25 could work. But you got to remember, he's coming off of an injury. That's my biggest concern, is the injury more than the age. And he is a dual threat guy. He's a guy who uses his legs, right? So, you know, and we've seen quarterbacks who run age a little bit faster, right? I mean, Drew Brees and Tom Brady played into their 40s, and Brett Favre played into his 40s. They also didn't run a lot. And Brett Favre towards the end was rough to watch because he took a lot of hits, right? So that's more my concern, is that it's the age combined with the fact that he's coming off of a major injury.
Which leads me to my next question, Calvin. I mean, what's the quarterback room look like for the Saints in 2023? I mean, after April, what does this quarterback room look like in your head and in your opinion come May?
So, bro, it's tough. I mean, they're not giving me a lot of indication what we want to do. I mean, because to me, if you get Derek Carr, I don't really see too much of a point in like going get Hendon Hooker, because if you get in Derek Carr, you're going to commit to Derek Carr for the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's just how it is. Unless he just, stinks it up in, his first year, you just might cut your losses, whatever. So you could go that route. I would say Trey Lance, but I don't know how possible that is anymore now that, Jimmy G's probably out the door now, and with Brock Purdy having the unfortunate injury. So he's probably there. Jordan Love's not going to be there. Zach Wilson just seems like that could be a product of the system. Who knows? But, he's possible. The last week or so has made not only free agency, but like potential trade quarterbacks really slim. Like it just shrunk immediately, just with injuries and different situations and all that. So, I mean, Derek Carr is the best quarterback right now, I would say, in free agency. I mean, unless Tom Brady decides to come back, but that's a no-go for me. I'm not doing that. I mean, it's tough, really. Me, if it doesn't cost too much, if somehow the 49ers don't really want Trey Lance, if it doesn't cost too much, kick the tires on him, maybe kick the tires on Zach Wilson, see what you could do with him. I mean, he's bad right now, but he's shown some good attributes and good flashes here and there. I just don't want to get into a situation where I'm like the Panthers, where they had Sam Darnold and PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield all in one room. I don't want to be like the Commanders, we're going to get Carson Wentz because, he was good, whatever. I don't want to fall into that trap. And I also don't want to be like the Browns of falling into just drafting bad with quarterbacks and having bad luck with quarterbacks. I don't want to draft a Hendon Hooker and turns out the injury was far more just terrible for him than anyone could have imagined. Obviously, if you get Anthony Richardson, if he slides to like the 3rd round, whatever, and he turns out to, just be way too raw and you can't develop him, I mean, we're looking at a Paxton Lynch, that's terrible. Drew Lock maybe potentially could be there. I mean, Geno Smith's going to sign that long-term contract. You give Drew Lock another chance. He was, he was pretty decent. He's all right. They think he's good enough if you trade him for, Russell Wilson, but, man, I mean, so shorten my answer a little bit. I would go with 2 possibilities, right? Either you keep it young and you trade for one of these backup young quarterbacks, like Jordan Love, Trey Lance, Drew Lock, Zach Wilson, whatever, and then you also draft somebody. Or you go the veteran route, like Derek Carr, and maybe you get like a Lindsey Scott, late round, kind of like what they tried to do with Ian Book, late round. Maybe he turns out to be great. Maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't, oh well, you use the late round pick or UDFA tag on him. Man, it's tough. But like I say, if you really want a quarterback, next year is your year.
Well, I would say.
Yeah, go to
I
you,
would say,
Carl.
yeah, got ahead of you a little bit there. I would say Derek Carr is the best realistic option. Because Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, you're not gonna be able to afford them. Even if they get on the market somehow, Saints are not gonna be able to afford to trade to get them or pay for them when they get here. And then I would say Derek Carr is probably your best bet, and then your second best bet, and you're not gonna like hearing this, is probably Andy Dalton. As crazy as it sounds, and I can't believe this statistic. He had the highest completion percentage of his career last year, which is beyond me because he had AJ Green for 7 years in Cincinnati. I mean, he had a good team around him in Cincinnati for years. Couldn't, got to the playoffs a few times, but didn't win in the playoffs at any point. Jimmy Garoppolo, I feel like he really is a system quarterback in every sense of the word. He's winning in San Francisco with the most talented roster in the league. It's kind of a sad state of affairs for the Saints that this is kind of what we're talking about right now. Okay, well, Derek Carr is probably the best option. It's I like Derek Carr, and statistically he is the best option, but it's he also hasn't won in this league. He's only made the playoffs twice in his career. Now, granted, the Raiders have been a mess, but Derek Carr, and then draft someone in the second or third round and develop them. It's probably your best course of action at this point, most realistic at least.
I mean, it scares me with Derek Carr, man. I mean, he had Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow. I mean, that's solid. That's a really solid pass catching core. But I mean,
I will say this about Derek Carr, though. Keep this in mind. He's never had a top 20 defense when he was with the Raiders. He's never had a top 20 O-line with the Raiders. Now, he comes to the Saints, he'd have a top 10 defense and probably a top 15 O-line. So, and that matters. I mean, receiving, obviously having great receivers matters, but having a great O-line for a pocket passer who doesn't run like Derek Carr, I'd be curious to see. He could win. They could win 9 games with him and win the NFC South, right? But go past that, I don't know. But I think they could at least make the playoffs with Derek Carr. It's kind of my thought process on it.
I think we'll definitely have to get him only if he's cut, though. I don't really like trading for a $40 million contract.
That's not happening.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of that. So if we get him, it would definitely have to be if he gets cut.
You'd have to deal that second round pick this year and then the one that Denver gave the Saints next year.
Probably so. Here's a bold take on Derek Carr. I don't think he winds up in the Saints. I think the way things work when it comes to being a Saints fan, you always expect the worst. And I think the one thing that I want to predict is I think Derek Carr winds up in Tampa. I think the Bucs swoop in, sign Derek Carr.
Winds up in Tampa.
I think Garoppolo winds up in Vegas with Josh McDaniel.
Really?
They're old Patriot buddies. I think they wind up together in Vegas, and I think Derek Carr winds up in Tampa. I think Tampa goes and snipes Derek Carr up just to spite the Saints because they know
the DA
that doesn't scare me though. That's not scary at all though. That doesn't move my needle for the Bucs. It just doesn't. Honestly,
I mean the Bucs do have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but I mean
they're in a similar spot as the Saints. They're in a similar spot as the Saints in that they don't really. I mean, Todd Bowles I think is a better coach than Dennis Allen, but I mean he ain't a great coach either. It's kind of both teams really when they lost. Their 2 head coaches, it's they go defense, and you get 2 head coaches that flamed out in the past and both still kind of repeated the same mistakes again. So they're in really a similar position.
I'm gonna worry about the Panthers, man. That's the team I'm worried about.
I think they're the favorites right now.
They just hired an amazing defensive coordinator. right?
An
And
amazing
then
head
if
coach.
everything falls right for them in the draft, they could end up with like a Will Levis or a CJ Stroud or a Bryson. I'm not trying to play that, twice a year for the next
And they have a
10
good
years.
defense too.
And the defense is good too. Yes,
Yeah.
like I'm not trying to deal with that. I mean, you see it looked like we were beating up on the Panthers, which we were, but we still lost the game. That's crazy. It's crazy. That's just how good their defense is. Like people don't really, talk about that, but it is
And
true.
they got Frank Reich now.
Yes.
They got the best coach in the division now.
Oh yeah, it's
Like-
crazy how because Calvin's the one that texted me that said Everett to the Panthers, and I'm just thinking, I had that feeling. I knew some type of way he was going to wind up in the division and not be with us. So now you have Frank Reich and now you have Everett as the DC. I mean, easily the best staff in that entire NFC South. And on top of that, I mean, I don't even know if Derek Carr is going to go to Carolina, but if they get somebody, Carolina's a trade-up candidate for me in this draft where I think they might try to move up and go get CJ Stroud. I truly believe that's going to be their plan, and if they do, it's going to be scary times. I really think if Frank Reich gets his hands on CJ Stroud, it's going to be some scary hours for us as Saints fans and those in the division. NFC South, it might be the Panthers for a couple of years.
Most underrated coach in the league. I mean, they axed him in Indianapolis, and then you see what a disaster they turned into. It's like the guy was forced to use Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan, and he still won 9 games with Carson Wentz last year. Like they beat the Chiefs with Matt Ryan this year, and could end up with CJ Stroud this year. It's like, good God, and a good defense.
Well, I mean, we're kind of towards the end. I only have a couple more questions for you guys because, I mean, I don't think there's really much else to talk about. I think we kind of covered everything that we needed to cover. But so the Saints made a staff hire that I actually liked. I mean, there was a lot of people out there saying, wow, why this guy? Saints hired former college defensive coordinator Ty Grantham to be an assistant coach. They didn't name what position he's going to coach yet, but I do have a feeling it's going to be the D-line. Now, I want to get your thoughts first on that hire, Johann.
Okay. I'm indifferent on it. I mean, like the defense is really not my concern. I mean, I'll give DA credit for this and this alone. The defense plays for him. They play for him. And I think getting experience helps. Losing Ryan Nielsen sucks. Especially to a division rival. Way to go, Mickey Loomis, allowing him to interview with Atlanta. I mean, I guess, yeah, okay. Just get someone who could coach the defensive line, just well enough, basically. Because I think the D-line is not really your issue at the moment. Although if they lose Onyemata and Davenport and a number of these impending free agents, it might turn into one quick. But I mean, it never hurts to get someone who knows what they're doing, period, at all.
I think Davenport's going to leave and go join Nielsen in Atlanta. But Calvin, I want to get your thoughts on the Ty Grantham hire.
Sure. It's cool, I guess. I'm with y'all on this one. I mean, like, it ain't a sexy move. I mean, it ain't the move we all wanted because, we all wanted Pete Axe. But, I mean, give me some offensive help, please. Like, that's what I want. I want some nice, new, fresh, young blood in this offense, man. Inject some life into this stale-looking offense at the moment, man. That's what I really need. I mean, I'm with y'all on this one. D-line and all that, I do think D-line could potentially be a problem. It might be a problem now. I mean, the defense is pretty solid, but, I mean, you do have free agents like P.J. Williams, who's been, can't believe I'm saying this. He has been solid. Been injured this year, but.
The king of one-year deals.
Yeah, the king of 1 year. He's always back on these 1 year deals, and I appreciate him for it. I respect him for it because he does ball out on those 1 year deals. Criminally underpaid, in my opinion. But I mean, the defense. We're gonna go out here. I mean, Carl Granderson was probably one of your best ends late in the season, so we're gonna find talent at the end. That's not your first round pick because the last 2 first round picks have been just. I will escort Marcus Davenport to the airport myself.
If the first round pick is going to be Keon White, that's my prediction right now.
Oh boy,
Defensive end out of Wake Forest. He fits the RAS score, guys.
The RAS score.
That was about to be
he's
my
big,
next
he's
question.
developmental. He's another Peyton Turner. I can't wait.
That was about to be my next question. I thought Keon White played for Georgia Tech, but
Yeah, you know what? He does play for Georgia Tech. I'm mistaking him. There's a defensive tackle who plays for Wake Forest.
You're right.
I'm mistaking the two. He does play for Georgia Tech.
But that was gonna be my next question. Okay, so last question for the podcast, unless y'all have something else. Pick 29. Saints are on the clock. I'm gonna go to Calvin first because who the Saints pick at 29, Calvin?
I got options because we know how the Saints are, right? So me
I'm
personally, I want offense, right? I want a receiver, right? I'm fine with it. Or I'm cool with a D lineman if you just don't RAS score and injury history and all this other. Don't do that to me again. I don't need it. So Jalen Hyatt, I mean that speaks for itself. Jahmyr Gibbs, people say he could be the next AK. If that's the case, gimme. Brian Branch, if he's there, real good speed, good range, discipline. I think he's also one of the guys you might be able to, flex different positions. Since we love to do that, we moved Delonte Taylor around a good bit, PJ Williams, those type of guys. BJ Ojolari, Cam Smith, guys like that. Andre Carter, I'm going to take your guy on that. I think he'll be nice. I said last podcast, we need to get some Micah Parsons type DNs in the building. Give me some young, fast, and versatile DNs, please, for the love of God. Or, finally use Zach Bond the way he should be used and bring him down on the edge. I think that would help. But those are my guys at 29.
Well, Johann, pick 29. Saints are on the clock. Who are they taking?
I said Keon White, and I'm using him as an example. I don't necessarily think it's going to be him necessarily. He just fits the mold. He's, again, a bit of a project, but he is athletically, he's a freak, right? Again, I'm with Calvin. I want offense. What do I think it's going to be? It's going to be like a defensive tackle, maybe. The guy from Baylor, Ika, could be him. Could be Kalijah Cansey. I have a very strong feeling it's going to be defense, though. I'd be shocked if it's offense. For no other reason than you can find value on offense later in the draft. Usually, you can find a great receiver in the 4th round. Romeo Dobbs was the 4th round pick this year, right? So you can find those guys later. But yeah, I just had I want it to be offense. I have a very strong feeling it's going to be defense, specifically the defensive line. So that's my opinion on it.
Well, I don't disagree with any of y'all, and Calvin didn't say mine already, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'd say that we have to take somebody like Andre Carter II, and I actually did some research, Calvin, today. It would be the first time since 1947 that an Army player is drafted in the 1st round.
Hey, I was close. I said since World War II, I was close.
World War II ended in 44, 45, so we was a few years off, but not much. But I would take Andre Carter II at pick number 29. But if the Saints are actually feeling froggy enough to actually just shock everybody and take a quarterback like Hendon Hooker at 29, would not hate it. But
I would. Low key though. Low key.
Why?
Come on now. We just talked about it for the last 30 minutes. We just talked about it, man. Injuries, age, all that. Give me Hendon in the 3rd round if he's there.
Logan loves Hendon Hooker, man. That's his last year's Kenny Pickett.
That's his Kenny Pickett.
This year it's Hendon Hooker.
I hate it. I told him last year he ain't getting Kenny Pickett. And
in fairness, though, he was right about Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett looks good, so he got us on that one.
I ain't giving it to him yet. He looks all right. I ain't giving it to him yet. The boy ain't do nothing special to me yet.
He did beat the Saints though.
All right, well, so did most of the league. That's fine.
It is, yeah. 10 of them, 10 teams beat.
All right, hey, but we beat your boy Gardner Minshew though. You were talking all about Gardner Minshew. Yeah, we shut him down. We shut that down. All right, no, don't give me no Gardner Minshew. Well, I told you about that boy.
I don't want Gardner Minshew. He's cool, but I really don't want Gardner Minshew. I was just saying the name just to mess with you.
We don't. No. You weren't putting it on Twitter to mess with me. No.
Realistically, I like Andre Carter though. I think if he falls to 29, I think he's gonna go earlier than 29. But if he falls to 29, I think that'd be a solid pick. And if they do bring back Davenport, or hell, even if they don't, they could rotate him in with Granderson. Kind of do what the Eagles did a few years ago when they won the Super Bowl. Rotate your DNs, keep them You know, that's what the Saints had success with all those years they were winning. They rotated Hendrickson, Davenport, Cam Jordan, right? So
Andre Carter really. I
wouldn't be
mean,
angry.
we was talking about the Michael Parsons, and Andre Carter could really be another Michael Parsons, because you got to think about this. All those guys in Army have to be a certain weight and they have to be fast, because I mean
And they're
they got to.
disciplined. They don't commit penalties.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
commit penalties when you run in the triple option, but hey.
Well, that's why they run the athletes that, you know, traditional schools do. So they have to run an offense that, you know, that is archaic, if we're being honest. And in order to run an offense like that, you can't commit penalties. So,
And they
who else
also
will slow
have
you
to
down?
pass the military fitness exams and all that good stuff. That's why I was told they run the triple option, because their offensive linemen can't be like 300-pounders. These guys have to still go overseas and fight these wars for us. So I would love Andre Carter so much. I would be happy with that. And then that pick for it, if we do get Hendon, so be it. But if we do get Derek Carr, I would not hate that either. I would be very much in favor of it. But before we wrap this up, is there anything that we did not mention, you guys, that y'all just want to get off your chest before we head on out?
I feel like the Saints might trade up. We're talking about 29 a lot here, but I feel like Mickey has another plan, right? I feel like last
You can
year
only hope.
I think last year he bet on himself in trading that first round pick to move up to get Chris Olave, which for everyone who's mad at it, I'm really not. I mean, Chris
That was a
Olave
home
is
run pick.
amazing. Chris Olave was number 1 on my board. I'm glad we got him. You know, that was my guy. Logan remembers Chris Olave. That's my guy. And I'm glad we got him. Now, Trevor Penning, I think he'll be fine. He's a project too, but you know, he has the size. I think he'll be okay. We've developed offensive linemen pretty decently. I'm fine with it. But he traded that pick because he felt like he could get another pick, you know, this year, which he did. And I got another feeling that he just might do it again. He might trade up here because 29 is a little awkward. I see us doing it. Just depends on if we see a prospect we really like.
I hope they don't do that. Can we not trade the future for once? Come on, guys, please. We just went 7-10. We need some picks for the future. No, I mean, what you're saying is true, though. I mean, if they fall in love with someone, they will fight to go get that prospect. And last year in the first round, I loved those 2 picks. Like, I wanted Jamison Williams at first, but I mean, I admit when I'm wrong. Chris Olave was a home run. Dude's the best receiver in that class. And then I do like Penning. He looked good when he played, right? He was hurt, but he looked good when he was active. I'd like to see him get a running back at some point. I'd like to see him get a running back in like round 2 through 5. If they can grab, there's a lot of good running backs in this draft. Jahmyr Gibbs, Tyjae Spears, the kid from East Carolina, Keaton Mitchell. They get one of those guys. Zach Evans from Ole Miss. There's a lot of good running backs. There's a kid from Pittsburgh too, whose last name I can't pronounce, starts with an A. He'd be a good 3rd down back. So I'd like to see him grab a running back at some point, round 2 or later.
Pending Alvin Kamara's, you know, suspension. That's probably
and they just need another running back. I mean, Mark Ingram is well past it, and like they just need another running back. Simple as that, you know.
I mean, when we had, you know, the Super Bowl teams in 2011, all that, we were rotating about 3 or 4, like really quality
3 running backs. 3.
Darren Thomas, Darren Sproles, Mark Ingram, and then Chris Ivory for a few years.
Yeah, Chris Ivory went on and he became a starter, you know, for the Jets. Travis Cadet, he left. He became, you know, a pretty good back. We've always had great backs, and like, you know, in 2017, you know, we absolutely hit a home run with Alvin Kamara. I didn't think Alvin Kamara was going to be that, you know, just because he wasn't even really the feature back in Tennessee at the time. But, you know, he turned out to be fantastic. And we had Boom and Zoom, which I get. We tried again, but, you know, Mark he showed it to you. He can do it sometimes, but not anymore. Not anymore.
I want to ask you guys this. When we drafted Kamara, were you guys surprised? Because I remember when we drafted him, we had Adrian Peterson on the roster, remember? And I was just like, wait. And I was with a friend of mine. We were like, wait a second. They just drafted a running back, but they got Adrian Peterson. They got Mark Ingram. It's like, why did they get another running back? Well, we see why they got him. They actually traded up to get him. they traded back into the third round to get him. So you can
I
find
mean,
value for running backs late.
I was okay with it because, I mean, it's like I tell Calvin, I mean, I'm like an old school football fan, and I like the run game. I mean, ground and pound. I mean, rotate them. Let's get back to 2011. Let's get back to 09. I mean, that's why I told him this year. Hey, let's get back to 09 offense. Let's get back to the 2011 offense. Let's rotate these running backs. But we got to get going. We are
Dang,
definitely.
Logan, you gonna skip my answer? Dang, that's crazy. Nah. No, I was not surprised. We got my biggest thing that year was like get some defense, which we did, and as we all know, that turned out to be excellent players on defense. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them aren't here anymore. Thank you, Mickey, for just being a cheapo, whatever. I'm gonna keep it PG, but no, I wouldn't be surprised at it. I mean, Adrian Pearson was old. Mark, I remember my dad was saying, "Oh, Mark should have been out of the league by then." According to my dad, I was always a big Mark Ingram truther. I've loved Mark Ingram. I always believed he would hit 1,000 yards one day. I was always on that one, and he finally did. And he was older. Even back then, 5 years ago, that's a crazy thing. Well, 6-7 years ago, whatever it is now. So they were aging. Getting a new, fresh guy in there, I wasn't surprised with it.
Well, we are definitely way over time, so we got to get going, you guys. And
It's called a good podcast, Logan.
It is true.
We nailed it with content.
That's right. Stop trying to make the podcast 45 minutes, man. Podcasts need to be long, right? People like listening to long podcasts.
As long as it's a conversation and we're talking about good content, I mean, we killed it though. I was happy with this.
Yeah, we did kill it. I did enjoy this one, and I always enjoy having you on, Johann. It's always good to see you because we don't get to
appreciate it anytime, my friend.
We don't always get to see each other.
Help me speak some sense into Logan with these quarterbacks, please. I needed it. I need someone on my side. Yes.
We're gonna have Johann on again around the scouting combine, and then again during the draft too.
Yes.
Because I know how much he loves that, and he knows how much I love it too. So, with that being said, you guys, this has been another great edition of The Hit. We shall see you next time.